So thank you, Mehmet, for nominating me. I mean, I heard about the GERAD institution like many, many years ago, so it would be like a privilege to be part of it. So as Mehmet said, my name is Maxime Cohen. I joined McGill University 2 years ago. And to be honest, I feel like Montreal is really like a good home for us because I'm originally from France. My wife is from Toronto. So I always make the joke that Montreal is kind of the convex combination of both of our backgrounds. So we really like it here. So I'm going to focus on one paper, but before talking about this paper, I'm going to have 2 slides, a little bit about my background. So the first slide is literally about myself in terms of background, research, and consulting. I will try to go a little fast. So I'm a professor of retail and operations management. In particular, I'm affiliated with the Ben Sadun School of Retail Management. I recently was awarded the Scale AI Chair in Data Science for Retail. So the next 5 years, I'm building a research program on helping retailers to leverage their data and AI to improve operational decision. So I'm interested in pricing, promotion, marketing, inventory, assortment, any type of operational decision in retail context, both online and physical, where data can help retailers. As part of my job, I'm also co-director of the McGill Retail Innovation Lab, which is a partnership between McGill University and Couche-Tard. And before moving to Montreal, I was an assistant professor at NYU Stern. And before that, I was a research scientist at Google AI. Now, another part of my involvement in Montreal, and that's why I know Jean-François and Guy personally, I'm also a scientific advisor in AI and data science for Ivado Labs. And I have to say that I'm really, really enjoying this gig. Now, in terms of background, I got a PhD in OR from MIT. My PhD advisor was Georgia Perakis. And before that, I got a master's and bachelor's in engineering from the Technion in Israel. So I was born and grew up in France. Then I moved to Israel for 12 years. Then I moved to the US for my PhD and a little bit of academia for 9 years total. And now I've been 2 years in Montreal. So if you sum it up, you can probably like guess what my age is. Now, in terms of research interest, as Mehmet said, I have a lot of my research is focused on retail operations and in particular on revenue management and pricing. More recently, I started collaborating with online platform and marketplacing and doing a little bit of A/B testing and field experiments. So the talk I'm going to present today is one of these type of research streams, working with an online platforms and presenting the results and the design of an A/B test. And more recently, like in the last year and a half, I've been doing quite a bit of work on real estate. So I have 2 recent papers on this topic. I decided not to present these papers because they're a little bit far away from the OM community. I had interest in real estate from a very young age. Most of my family is dealing with real estate investment. So that's something finally I could work on in the last 2 years. And if you are interested in this topic, I will be more than happy to talk about it offline. And of course, like starting from my PhD days, I always keep some type of research interest in sustainability. Now, in terms of consulting and collaborations, I've been working with several companies. Here's a list of companies. Today, I'm going to talk about a collaboration with Via. I will introduce the company in a few slides. And in Canada, I've been fortunate to work with the Aldo Group, as well as with Couche-Tard, both with the retail lab at McGill, as well as through the Ivado Labs collaboration. Now, in terms of, I have another slide about myself, sample of projects. So during my PhD, I spent more than half of my PhD developing models based on optimization and machine learning to optimize promotions for supermarkets. So this is a very long type of project, almost 5 years total. Started in the middle of my PhD and dragged 2 years after that. And we have quite a few work, both theoretical and practice. We have 1 paper in OR, 2 papers in management science, 1 paper in POMS, and 4 patents. So really like a big body of work. So optimization of promotions for supermarkets. The second stream that I did also during my PhD is how should governments give subsidies for green technology adoption. So governments want to incentivize consumers to adopt green technologies. Think about a Tesla, think about electric vehicles, think about solar panels installations on your roof. And typically the government is offering subsidies. And I know there's a few people, actually several people at University of Montreal that are also working on similar topics. Then the topic I worked during my postdoc at Google AI, where we come up with an idea of overcommitting for cloud services. So in the cloud services, they're solving a 2D bin packing problem, where you need to pack virtual jobs on machines. Typically, you have memory and CPU, so the power and the memory, and you need to bin pack them on machines in data centers. Now, what we observed by doing some simple analysis with the data, that typically if someone wants 100 gigabyte and 32 core CPU, they will not be using the entire capacity all the time. Typically, you assign 100 gigabytes and you're going to use 80, sometimes 90, sometimes 50. And we saw that on average, people are using only 60% of the capacity they are allocated to. Therefore, it gives a very nice opportunity to overcommit. If I have 1 terabyte, I'm going to sell maybe 1% extra and taking the risk that with some risk pooling, there will not be no penalty of violating the capacity constraints. So we came up with an algorithm to overcommit, and we show actually a very interesting property that if you overcommit by a tiny amount, even to 0.01%, it can save multiple $1 million because it gives you a lot of flexibility to reassign the scheduling of the jobs in data centers. So the paper is also available online, published in Management Science. Now, I did some work in the last few years, especially when I was living in New York. I've been working with a couple of hedge funds on peer-to-peer lending. So the papers are all on my website. Another interest of mine is ride-sharing operation. And the reason this is in blue is because today the talk I'm going to do is related to this research topic. I also have interest in demand forecasting and clustering. We have a recent paper, major revision in OR, where we combine demand forecast for retail application with clustering. And there is kind of a nice trade-off between aggregating more articles together to get more data and better prediction. But at the same time, if you aggregate items that are not similar in terms of demand patterns, you deteriorate the quality of the forecast. And we designed an algorithm that automates this simultaneous optimization between demand forecast and clustering. I did some work with Waze for the last two and a half years. I stopped like in a year ago to do some incentives for carpooling. So that's a talk I already presented as a GERAD seminar last year. So for people who were at the talk, probably you remember this talk. That's kind of a recent paper, also available on my website. Now, as I said before, I did a lot of work and I'm still working quite a bit on pricing problems, both from a theoretical and analytical perspective, as well from an empirical perspective. So I have a recent paper here, which is third round in Management Science about airline pricing in collaboration with a large airline. I presented this talk actually a few months ago at Air Canada and got a lot of very interesting feedback. We have also a paper on feature-based dynamic pricing, where you price, instead of pricing items, you price features that are representing items. So it's a very theoretical paper. And more recently, in the last 2 years, I did a lot of work on pricing with fairness. So that's a topic that is exploding in the machine learning community in terms of fairness of estimation, or fairness of prediction outcomes. You want that type 1 error, type 2 error are fairly distributed among different populations. Think about diversity, minorities, and so on. We adapted some of these ideas in revenue management and pricing with fairness constraints. So we have a first paper about static pricing, and that was accepted last week in Management Science. And we have the follow-up paper about dynamic pricing with fairness considerations. And this is also on my website. We submitted it last month. And finally, as I said before, I have 2 papers also fairly recently on empirical real estate. I believe there is a huge opportunity for people in our field to tackle and leverage real estate data, because real estate is a huge data. It's a very interesting market, but it was studied only from a finance and economics type point of view, and not really from an operational, like pricing, like inventory imbalance and so on. So I believe there is a lot of cool opportunities. And again, if anyone is interested, we'll be happy to talk offline. So let's dig deeper and move to the talk of today. So the talk of today is frustration-based promotions. And the motivation of the talk was from straining the importance of customer service. So if you look at the retail industry, or if you look at the services industry in general, there is a huge focus on customer service. And the reason being that customers nowadays have access to a large amount of information to compare alternative services. If you want to book a flight, you can go to kayak.com, you're going to compare all the alternative flights, the prices, the layover times, and so on and so forth. So that's one of the reasons. The second reason, it became very easy to switch between competing firms. You go to one airline, you can change. You go to one hotel, you can change. Same with restaurants, same with ride-sharing companies, and so on and so forth. Now, customers who complain, so of course, when you go to get a service, it's possible that you're going to have a poor quality of service or like a bad experience. We call it a frustration. And then you can complain. Now, what is interesting nowadays in the last 10 years or so, if you complain, and typically the first time you complain, you're going to receive something. So the best example, if you, like myself, use Amazon quite a bit, if you have a delivery delays on your Amazon order or jet.com, it's pretty easy to complain. You can just send a text message or go to their platform and say like, my package was late, and typically you're going to be issued a gift card, $5, $10, they're going to reimburse you something. So it takes very low effort to complain, and typically you receive a compensation. Similarly with hotels, when you go to a hotel, your room was not ready, they will give you a free bar voucher or like a discount for the next day. Same with the restaurant. Sometimes if you complain that your meal was not to your liking, you can get a free dessert or anything else. Now, what we observed in some data set that we use is actually most cases, customers do not complain. And again, people like us, which are very busy, will not take the time to go to give a call, to send an email, to complain. And in that case, if you don't voice your complaint, the service provider is not aware that you had a bad quality of service. No compensation is received. And then the customer are going to be unhappy and potentially are deciding to stop using the service, or at least to decrease the usage of the service. And the question that motivated this research is what firms can do, right? And so what we propose to explore here is proactive compensation. And we are not the first one to do it. And here are some examples, starting from the end of 2017, so almost 4 years ago, Amazon and Walmart deployed a big campaign of proactive compensation. So if you ordered an order for Christmas to give gifts to family and friends, and there was a delivery delay, the gift was received after Christmas, without complaining, Amazon will automatically reach out proactively and apologize for the delay and offer you something. Sometimes was $100 coupon, sometimes was some other type of gift card, and Walmart did exactly the same. Now, our idea is very similar to that one, is to use data in real time to automatically detect legitimate frustrations and then proactively send a targeted compensation to customers who experience a frustration. So in this sentence, I want to draw your attention to two keywords. The first one is frustrations. I'm going to make it very formal in a few slides, but here think about a poor quality of service. You use a service and you didn't get a good quality of service. And the second keyword is proactive. Again, customer had a bad quality of service, customer did not complain, but then the company will proactively reach out to the customer. Now, the question I want to tackle is how can we design proactive compensation campaigns? And we're going to compare different campaigns by doing A/B testing for customers who experience a frustration. And again, frustration in this context, poor quality of service. And I'm going to make it more formal soon. Now, this entire research was conducted in ride-sharing context. So I don't think I need to explain too much about ride-sharing for people who live in Montreal. Basically, it's an industry on its own. It disrupted the transportation industry, very popular for short distance commuting. We have many companies. We have about 60, 65 companies worldwide. In North America, we have Uber, Lyft. Via is number 3 in the US. We also have Get. We also have Didi in China, Grab, Ola in India, and so on and so forth. Many, many companies, around 60 companies. Now, within the ride-sharing context, there is the carpooling. So we don't have this in Montreal, but if you go to New York, if you go to San Francisco, even in Toronto, they started the Uber pool. So basically you can order an Uber. You either have the option of getting your own private car, or you can share the car with someone else. And typically you're gonna, customer orders a ride using a smartphone app. You specify origin destination. Let's say I want to go from HEC Montréal to the airport, Trudeau Airport. And then the service provider is going to offer you a price and a waiting time. So it's going to tell you, hey, it could cost like $25 and you're going to wait 7 minutes for the driver to pick you up. Then you have two options. Either you accept or you reject. If you accept, then the algorithm is going to dispatch a driver to come pick you up. And if you reject, you can decide to go to the outside option. You can take the subway, you can take a taxi, you can take anything else. Now, of course, as most of you probably would agree, when you take a ride-sharing service, many things can go wrong. And here are some examples. First of all, you can have a long waiting time. You order the rides and it takes forever for your driver to pick you up. That's definitely a frustration. For the carpooling, when I'm going to pool with other people, meaning that the car is going to come pick me up, and it's possible that the car will stop on the way to pick up or drop off other passengers who are going toward the same direction. In that case, of course, I'm willing to tolerate 1 or 2 stops on the way, but if the number of stops is very high, this can also be a bad customer service, meaning a frustration. Similarly, significant detours. Of course, driver no-show is a worse frustration. If you order the ride and the driver never showed up, it's definitely a bad quality of service. And the poor service interaction with the driver, and so on and so forth. Now, in this paper, we decided to focus on 2 types of frustrations, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time to explain them. The first one is a long waiting time. So if you wait a lot for the driver to come to pick you up, and we're going to operationalize this metric by the variable called ETA error. ETA error, I'm going to explain in a few minutes. The second one is a long travel time operationalized by the VGR. So let me explain those 2 variables in detail. So you wait a lot. How can we measure the waiting time? So here, the example of the company Via, which I'm going to introduce in the next slide. You order the rides, and in the ride here, you put origin destination. It's going to give you a price and a waiting time. So here it's written 2 minutes, $5. 95% of the rides from Manhattan to Manhattan, anywhere, are costing $5 flat price. So here you can see that the waiting time is 2 minutes, if I accept, meaning that these 2 minutes, it's called the proposed ETA. ETA stands for estimated time of arrival. So here VIA is giving me a contract telling me if you want a ride, we're going to come pick you up in 2 minutes, it's going to cost $5. And 2 minutes called the proposed ETA. Then I accept this ride, I book the ride. And then the driver is going to come pick me up, assuming the driver took 12 minutes to pick me up. The difference between these 2, the ETA error, is a difference between the realized ETA, in my example, 12 minutes, and the proposed ETA. So if VIA told me 2 minutes, I accepted, but then it took much longer, it's going to incur frustration. Because when we agreed on a contract, you told me it will take 2 minutes. So my baseline in my mind will be 2 minutes. And if there is a large ETA error, of course, it's a bad quality of service. Are there any questions about the definition of ETA error? Because it's important for the rest of the talk.
Maxime, maybe just a quick question there. Could it be a negative value?
Yes, that's a very good point. It can definitely be a negative value if, for example, it's a very, very short ride and the driver had to cancel, for example, right? Or let's say it's a very long value, it takes you 17 minutes. And then all of a sudden there is a very, very quick ride. So definitely it can have both positive and negative. In our sample, less than 0.1% of the realization over the last year was having negative values, but it's not impossible.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, thanks. Now, the second type of frustration is a long travel time. So think about this carpooling, where you're going to pool with strangers to save money, because typically those carpooling options are very cheap, and you can stop along the way. Now, what we did to capture that, because the long travel time, if I tell you the travel time was 45 minutes, it's not necessarily a bad ride, right? It depends on external factors and internal factors. That's the way I want you to think about it. If you want to measure the customer service in terms of travel time, the external factors, like for example, traffic, it's not the company's fault. If there is traffic, there is traffic. It's not like nothing, like it's not related to the quality of service of this specific company. If the highway is blocked, same. If there is bad weather, same. But then there is internal factor, like number of stops, like detour to pick up someone. So what we did for the purpose of this project was a very interesting piece of this paper. We used the Google Maps API to access the predicted time it would have taken to complete the exact same ride at the exact same time in a private car. So in the Google Maps API, you can put the same origin in the same destination at the same time, and it's going to tell you the prediction that Google thinks it will take you to go from A to B by having a private vehicle if you are driving yourself. And then we also have the via duration. So VGR stands for via Google ratio. We have the via duration. Let's say the trip with via took 20 minutes. If it was a private car, Google prediction will say that it will take, let's say, 10 minutes, VGR equal 2, meaning that you take twice as long because of the fact that you are sharing the ride with strangers. Of course, a high VGR means a bad quality of service. I'm willing to take more than a private vehicle because, of course, I'm going to get a much lower price. I know I'm going to pool with other people. So I'm willing to take another 10, 15, 20, 30% extra time because I get a good price by pooling. But if I tell you it's doubling or tripling my duration of the ride, of course, it's a very frustrating experience. And the VGR aims to capture this internal factor of long travel. Question about the VGR?
Hi, Maxime. I have a question. Actually, here, it might happen that the drop-off time is given, right? So do you think that the drop-off time is a good anchor for my disappointment rather than the time it takes for the Google Maps to give me a good time?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So actually, this company did a lot of A/B testing in terms of showing or not a drop-off time. And there is a kind of an interesting question embedded in that problem. Should you inflate or deflate this value, right? And they did a lot of A/B testing, and at the end, the conclusion was they decided not to show it anymore. It was creating a lot of benchmarking and a lot of anchoring effects that was actually more detrimental than anything else because the algorithm is really real-time based. It can stop on the way to pick up or drop off someone. And therefore, it was very inaccurate to give an actual drop-off at the beginning, creating a lot of frustration to customers, and they decided to not doing it anymore. So during all the data we had here in that project, the riders are not aware of a predicted drop-off time.
Thanks.
Great question. Good, so as I told you before, I'll talk a little bit about the background of this company called Via. So Via was founded in June 2012, so 9 years ago, focusing on real-time ride sharing. The big difference with Uber and Lyft is the fact that Via started as a carpooling company. So from day one, most of the rides were not in private vehicles. It was kind of a minivan. And in a van, in New York, it's a very good use case because a lot of people are living in the Upper West Side and go walk downtown. So a lot of people are having the same type of commute. So having a minivan with a very attractive price, it's very easy to pick up and drop off people. And today they have more than a third of the rides in Manhattan in terms of ride sharing, Uber and Lyft. Now it operates today in more than 70 cities around the world. So it operates in 3 cities in the US, in New York, Chicago, and Washington, DC. It operates in Tokyo, in Amsterdam, in London. It has a partnership in Paris with a company called The Cab. It also operates the Harvard University shuttle. It operates several hospital shuttles. It operates several public transit companies. So they do quite a bit of work worldwide, but here we're going to focus on the ride sharing in the US. Now they completed over 70 million. This number is from 2020. And as of Jan 2018, the official number is 1.5 million rides monthly. Today, this number is more 4 or 5 million, but there is no official figure available online. Now, it's been raising more than 375 million financing. The company is worth around 3 billion. So it's a big company, but it's not close from Uber and Lyft, which are much, much, much bigger companies, especially now that Uber is doing a lot of the money from Uber Eats and Via is purely a transportation company. Now, what is interesting in that company, there is a full department of people fully dedicated on customer service. So if you visit the headquarters, they have 2 headquarters offices, one in New York, one in Tel Aviv. And if you visit, there is a full floor of people fully dedicated on customer service. If you send an SMS or an email and you complain about something that went wrong in your ride, within 5 minutes, 95% of the complaints are handled. So they really pay a lot of attention to customer service, and they want to make sure that they deal with it very fast and in a very good way for customers. Now, as I told you before, this paper is about proactive compensation. So there are a few streams of literature that are relevant to this paper. The first one, there is a massive literature on service quality management. Of course, there is a literature both in OM and in marketing. A lot of topics like service quality, how do you define service quality, how do you measure it, how does it affect customer retention, customer churn, people are leaving the platform, and there is also a lot of literature on targeted campaigns. The second stream of literature is pricing and operational decision in ride-hailing. There is a ton of literature, especially in OM, but also a little bit in IS and economics, that are trying to operationalize the decisions. And what is interesting is we have a lot of colleagues in operation management that are now working for Uber, for Lyft, and so on and so forth, for Didi in China, and trying to develop better matching algorithm, better pricing algorithm. And it's an interesting problem because it's a two-sided problem. You have to decide how to charge the riders and how to pay the drivers. And the third stream of literature, which is field experiments in online platform, which is a topic fairly old in marketing and econ, which is a little bit more recent in our community. And as I said before, I focus now some of my research effort in this stream by answering some research questions where modeling is very hard to come up with. And as a result, the best way to test, or the only way to test, is by just running a field experiment. So actually, as an anecdote, this year I started for the first time to teach a full lecture to the students on A/B testing, and it was my best lecture of the semester. So I really enjoyed quite a bit this topic, and I feel there was a lot of appetite from students and from executives to learn more about A/B testing and experimentation for business world. So the rest of the talk is organized as follows. We've been running 3 experiments, experiment 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to spend most of the time on the first experiment, and then I will briefly mention in 5 minutes the last 2 experiments, and then I will conclude. So the first experiment was run in New York City. And the objective of this experiment was to investigate the impact of different proactive actions on riders who experience a frustration. Again, the same 2 keywords as before: proactive, people do not complain, the company is proactively reaching out, and the word frustration. Now, we already talked about it. So 2 types of frustration will be a long waiting time. And here we decided to use a threshold of 10 minutes. If the ETA error, which is the difference between the realized ETA and the proposed ETA, again, the example, I was being told the driver will come in 2 minutes, but then the driver came in 12 minutes or more, then I have an ETA of 10 minutes or more. It is a bad quality of service. Similarly, for the VGR, more than 2, meaning that the ride took double the time that Google predicted for the same ride at the same time to take if I was on a private vehicle and not carpooling with other people. So I think no one will argue that those 2 thresholds are very generous in the sense that, of course, if one or the other materializes, it's definitely a big frustration and customers will not be happy. We talked a little bit in the paper how we selected this threshold. For the interest of time, I will skip this part. It's not super insightful, and we cannot reveal most of the data distribution there. Now, we've been running this experiment for the summer, between July 5th and August 25th in 2017 in New York City, and includes a little bit less than 4,000 riders. Now, what does it mean? So someone takes a ride during this period in New York City, and if this person experiences either ETA larger than 10 minutes or VGR larger than 2.0, this rider is eligible to enter the experiment. And then we're going to divide all those riders at random into 4 conditions. 25% chance control. Control meaning we do nothing, right? We just know that this rider experienced a frustration and we just do nothing. The second one is comms. The third one is credit. And the fourth one is wait. So what does it mean? Comms, it means that we're going to proactively reach out and we're going to apologize, but we're not going to give any type of financial compensation. So again, rider experience of frustration, a bad quality of service. We're going to reach out proactively. We're going to apologize, but we will not be offering some money. Credit, Same, the rider experiences a bad quality of service, we proactively reach out and we give $5 of credit to be used for the next ride. And waived, we proactively reach out and we reimburse the previous ride. Now, just to give you a little bit more color, it works like that. When a rider experiences a frustration, he or she will receive a notification. So if I'm in a comms, so let me read the credit out loud. Hi, first name. It looks like your wait time earlier today was much longer than anticipated. We are so very sorry for any inconvenience this may have caused. As a token of our apology, we've dropped $5 of ride credit in your account. Now, if you're in a comms, then you're just going to get an apology, but no money. And if you are in a waived condition, you're waiving the charges for the trip. Now, to be honest, like that was the design of the experiment. The two decisions that took the most time for the company to agree on was the wording of those messages. And I'm embarrassed to say that we have a Google Doc with 22 versions of iteration with the comms and the marketing team, choosing every single word, like how to do it and so on, like totally like outside my research expertise, but it took quite a bit of time. Do we put a question mark here? Do we put an exclamation mark here? We don't, and so on. And apparently they did a lot of A/B testing before this specific experiment. They know what to write. And the second interesting operational decision is when to send this message. So if you think about it, if I take the ride and I have a bad quality of service, the psychology literature tells us we don't want to apologize too fast. If I took now and I had a bad frustration, I don't want to receive the apology 2 minutes after, because people are still very angry and very like, they don't want. At the same time, you don't want to do it too late. You don't want to send the apology 3 days after. People have forgotten already this frustration. So after a lot of debate and a lot of review on the psychology literature, we decided to do between 1 and 2 hours. So we try to do everything after 1 hour, but sometimes because of engineering issue was between 1 and 2 hours. And we believe it was not too early and it was not too late. Of course, as a future research direction, there can be a research question of what is the optimal timing to apologize and proactively compensate writers. And now the goal of this experiment is to understand how these 3 different actions, which are all proactive, will affect the engagement behavior. So of course, the next part is to decide how we're going to define the engagement behavior. So here we look at 2 very simple metrics. The key metrics, the first one is average total spending during capital T weeks. So we just measure it as follows. So S is spending, T is a time window. We're going to vary T 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, both to look 1 week and 1 month. In the revision process, they ask us to vary it all the way to 12 weeks. So we did that as a robustness checks as well. And here, NJ are number of users in condition J. Again, we have 4 condition random split, control, comms, wave, and what was the name of the third one? And credits. And then we're going to sum all the users in condition J, all the time between 1 and capital T, and we put all the spendings. And the second one, which is highly correlated with the first one, total number of rides. Of course, they're highly correlated. Most of the ride costs $5, so it's almost true that this multiplied by 5 give you that one, but it's not exactly, because some people are taking much longer rides, some people are taking rides with 2 people and so on. So we wanted to capture the 2 types of engagement, which are dollar value and number of interaction or transactions with the platform. So before showing the results, are there any question about the design or the objective of the experiment?
Hi, Maxime. Are you assuming that the marginal disutility of waiting would be the same across all customers?
Yes, because of the randomization. So basically the randomization somewhat takes care of all this hardcore effect, because if you do a pure randomization, you can check the balancedness of your samples. And if more or less they are balanced, then you can assume that everything is homogeneous, basically.
So you are randomizing like in terms of like where the delay would be? Like, are you controlling for the delay?
No. I randomized among all the people who experience a high delay, which one of the treatment they will receive.
Okay, only in the treatment you have it.
Exactly. We don't manipulate the waiting time also. We just let the platform go as usual. And when there is a bad quality of service, we take all those users and we randomize different targeted incentives to see what works best.
Okay, thank you.
Very good question. To be honest, my intuition at the beginning was actually that between credit and waived will work better for two reasons. The first reason, waived is more money than credit because all the rides are at least $5. So here actually the average was $5.62. So it's more money. And second of all, like the executive at the company, especially the chief marketing officer, always told me, look, waiving is the best. We don't force people to use our service in the future. We just give them back the money. It's more respectful. And they believe that waived was the best one. Everyone that was complaining, they were waiving by reimbursement. And my first conjecture was credit and waive will work more or less the same, maybe waived a bit better. But comms probably will work fairly well. And it's a cheap talk, right? Because it doesn't cost you anything. The only problem with comms is you cannot do it more than once. If you do it once and then you do it again a week after, of course, it's a very bad quality of service. If I have time at the end, I will discuss about this dynamic retention type of mechanism. So
the funny thing, sorry, Maxime,
Yeah.
the funny thing is that in the case of credit and waive, you don't tell them that the tech team is trying to figure out what went wrong. So you don't give them the impression that you will fix the issue, just give them the impression that if something bad happens again, they'll get more credit.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I was actually very against adding this sentence for the comms, and I couldn't win this fight. They wanted to apologize and saying that they're trying to solve the problem, right? But here, as you said, as Jean-François said, like we don't have this aspect in the other two conditions. So you can look at comms as apologizing genuinely by saying that you try to solve, or just as giving money. Do people prefer like authenticity, or they prefer money? But that's a very good limitation. So yeah, without further ado, let's look at the basic results. And here I always like to show the result of experimentation by showing one plot. So this is the entire paper is on this plot. So in red, you have the control people. Again, people experience of frustration, did not receive anything. You have the comms people who receive this apology without money. You have the credit people and the waived people. And we do the spending for the next 4 weeks. In the next month, after, so you experience on day one the frustration. On the same day, 1 hour after, you get your treatment. If you're in the control, you get nothing. And then we track those users for the following month, 4 weeks. And then we normalized all these numbers. So think about all these numbers that we divide them by a factor. Let's say they divide by a number like 4, 5, or 6. I cannot reveal the exact number, but we just care about the relative differences. And when we look at these plots, we see an interesting, striking message. There is one clear winner. Credit is improving over each of the other conditions, but the other 3 are not statistically significant different from each other. You can see that this is the mean, and this is error bar at a 5% level. So the error bars are overlapping, meaning those 2 numbers are not statistically different. So if I want just to write down in English the results, we find that the riders in credit condition spend 12% more relative to the riders in control. The riders in credit spend 13% more relative to the comms, and the riders in credit spend almost 12% relative to the waived. However, the credit condition is different from each other condition, but the other 3 conditions are not statistically different from each other. And it was a big surprise for the company because so far the belief was waived is the best. Maybe credit is also good, but waived the best. Here, what we show in this experiment that waived doesn't work at all, and credit works really well. Now, another interesting part, because a credit is giving $5. Now, if you think about the mechanism of credit from a finance point of view, it's a much better mechanism. Why? When you give the waive, it costs you money automatically. For everybody who had a frustration, you're going to reimburse. When you give $5 of credit, if people don't use it, it costs you 0. And if people use it, they give you back the money, right? So definitely from a financial point of view, credit is better than waive. Now, if you subtract the $5, it's still revenue positive, and the dollar value difference between those 2 fellows is $9.62. You almost get 100% return on investment in 1 month. meaning you invest $5 relative to not investing in a control, and you get back after a month $9.62, meaning that $5 that you pay plus $4.62, return on investment of 100%. This is one of the most successful campaigns that the company has been running in terms of targeted incentives. So that's the finding, that's kind of the punchline of the talk. And now the interpretation. So as I told you before, the finding is the fact that it's more effective to credit a rider's account. I give you $5 for the next ride, relative to just waiving the charge. And this is even true that waiving was more money than the credit. It was $5.62 on average, here was $5. And here's one potential explanation we came up with. When you send credit, you offer the opportunity for the rider to use the service again, right? So basically I tell you, hey, we are very sorry, give you $5, and you have the $5 in your balance. You can say, you know what, even if I really didn't like my experience last time, it's a free ride, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. Now, what is interesting is those frustrations happen very rarely. I forgot to say that at the beginning, but here we focus on very rare events. Waiting 10 minutes extra or taking double the time of the ride happens less than 1% of the time. So once you have an opportunity to use the service again, the rider is very likely to experience a very high quality of service. He won't have, again, this poor frustration. Therefore, it will correct from the previous frustrating experience. Like the opposite, if you send an apologetic message or if you waive the charge, it's more like an instant treatment. You give the money back and that's it. So the customer is so angry. Give the money back. Okay, give me my money back. I'm done. I'm not trying again the service. I really didn't like it. But if you give them an opportunity, it's not really forcing them. You give them, hey, try it again. It's on us. Try it again. Very, very high chance you have a very good quality of service. And therefore, it's going to correct for the frustration and increase the retention. And that's why credit is the only mechanism that has this opportunity. Again, this is one potential explanation we came up with. The reviewers during the review process gave us many other, like for example, based on prospect theory, this asymmetry between getting money and giving back money. There are potentially many other mechanisms totally beyond my research expertise. So now what we did, we sliced a little bit.
Maxime,
Yes?
just maybe another bit of explanation is that people don't like leaving money on the table. So if you have a credit, of course, if you don't use it, you feel like you've lost money. And so if you need to ride and you have a choice between taking a bus, taking a taxi, or taking that service and using your credit, of course, you'll be looking forward to having the chance to use that credit and not abandon the money in your account.
That's totally true. But then maybe you use it once and that's it, right? And you never come back after that.
True. Yeah.
So here what happened is they use it and they use it even more after. So there is this correction type of mechanism that like you get a good quality of service, but because what you said is true, I think a lot of people, including myself, if I have a free ride, I will take it. What was not clear, and Via was very scared of that we give $5, people are going to use a free ride and never come back again. But this did not happen. Even 12 weeks after, you see that the retention is larger. I will show you in a few minutes. So we started slicing the data. So far, we look at the average treatment effect. The first slicing dimension is to separate the frustration type. So we have two types of frustration, ETA error and VGR. So long waiting time, long travel time. And what we find here, which was fairly surprising to us, is that credit works really well for waiting time, but doesn't work very well for the VGR, which capture the long travel time. I wonder if anyone has an idea. I mean, again, it's just a potentially plausible explanation. So one idea that we had was when you wait long, you tend to blame the service provider because you told me 2 minutes before I accepted. And then it took much longer. So if it took much longer, literally like it's your fault. On the other hand, if the ride takes long, people tend to blame it on traffic, tend to blame it on other things that are not really like the blame of the platform. Another potential explanation, when you wait, it's kind of stressful. You wait in the street, if it's raining, you're cold and so on, you're hot, like whatever, like it's stressful. When you are in the car, you can play on your phone, you can take it easy. Like people don't feel the weight as bad because they are busy. You can, yeah, that's an interesting one. You can blame it on the other users. Although I would argue it's not really their fault, but typically we replicated this experiment 3 times and we saw that it works much better for this frustration, and most of the time it doesn't even work at all. You can see here it's higher, but it's not statistically significant. It's really on the verge, and we replicated this with different thresholds. We have a lot of details on the paper, like they gave us a lot of hard time to argue this difference in the paper. So we did a lot of statistical testing to convince and support the finding that it works for ETA, but not for BGR. The second slicing is by usage. So here we split the users, the high frequent users, the medium, and the low frequent, occasional users. Here also very interesting finding. We find, and again, we replicated the experiment 3 times, it does not work for new riders. For new riders, if you use it the first once or twice, if you have a bad frustration, it's devastating. Even if I give you a gift card, you're done with the service. Think about it. You try a new service for the first time. You get a very bad experience. You got unlucky. Even if I give you $5, you say, okay, I'm done. Now, what we found is it works both for medium and high groups. And the highest relative return on investment was for the medium. You move from 8.6 to 10. So this finding has a lot of operational implications. Because you have a limited budget for promotions, you should better apologize in priority for the medium people. Why is it the case? The high users already are very loyal to the platform. They use it a lot. They use it 2, 3 times a week. So once in a while, if they have a bad quality of service, they already like you, they're loyal, you don't really need to apologize. If you do, it will help a little bit. The medium one are the ones that are switchers. They go sometimes to Uber, sometimes to Lyft, sometimes to VR. So those people in priority, you want to make sure that you take care of them. The new users, you cannot even mess up. If you mess up, you're done. So after this paper, VIA decided to switch the matching and the dispatch algorithm for new users. If you're new users, the first ride, you either not going to pull at all, or you will pull with only one other person. And for the wait time, they also adapted the wait time algorithm for new users to make sure not to create those frustrations, because those frustrations are very hard to correct. So Nurit is making a comment about typical waiting time penalty in transit assignment modeling is 2.5 the in-vehicle time. I see. So 2.5 is like, yeah, I mean, I guess it also highly depends on what is the wait time to start with, if it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes. But that's interesting. That's a pretty big factor. Good. The next one is the time window. This is a very interesting plot in my opinion. So the x-axis is a day after exposure to the experiment. So again, on day 0, you take the ride, you get a bad experience, a frustration, and 1 hour after, you get the treatment. And then we track those users 1 week after, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And here I compare control versus credits, okay? Now what you see is starting from 1 week, you can see a statistical significance at 5% level. And then you can see that the gap widens. After 4 weeks, you get this 12, 13% improvement. But here you can attack the finding by saying, look, maybe those 2 populations are not the same. So what we did, we went 1 month in the past and we tracked those people. And you can see here, we're going to assume that 28 days before the exposure to the test, we're going to take the same set of people and we're going to track them. So here it's a month before the frustration. No frustration happens. And we track those users 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And you can see it's perfectly matched. The randomization was really well executed. Those people are extremely similar in terms of consumption patterns. But here in time 0, there was a frustration, and then the consumption is going to start diverging all the way here with a 13% difference. So this is similar to a difference in differences, which I'm going to do formally in a few minutes. So the next one is to do a regression analysis. So just typical regression, we control for several factors. We control for the pre-experiment rides. How often did you ride in the last 3 months before the experiment? We control for the type of frustration, and we also have fixed effects at the day level. Each day will have different day fixed effects. Now we did a bunch of robustness checks. Everything is in the paper with and without fixed effects. We did both OLS and Poisson regression. We did log transformation on several variables, separate regressions, pooled regressions, and so on and so forth. Everything was super consistent. Here are three models: linear model, log model, and log model with different controls. So you can see across all three models, the coefficient of credit is positive and statistically significant, and the coefficient of coms and waves are non-statistically significant. So that's the first big finding, telling us that only credit was effective. The second finding is that the pre-experiment rides is a moderating factor. And here you can see that the linear term is positive and the quadratic term is negative, meaning that you have this concave effect that the intermediate users are the one who gives the most effective one, as we found in a few minutes ago. The last empirical strategy is just difference in differences. So similar, just we add also the data before the experiment. So now we have before and after the experiment. We look at the interaction terms between the treatments. We have three different treatments and before and after. And similarly, those coefficients, only the interaction term with credit is positive and statistically significant. Both coms and waves are not statistically significant. So very quickly, in a few minutes, I will talk about the second and third experiment, one slide each. So we replicated the first experiment that was in New York City, and we did it in Washington, DC. Smaller experiments. We have only control, discount, and credits. So what do we do here? From the first experiment, our conclusion was credit works, waves and coms doesn't work. So the company decided to eliminate the one that don't work. Coms and waves are out. VGR is also out. So now we have control and credits, but we also added discounts. The question was, we give $5 of credit, but maybe it's too much. Maybe if you give $2 of credit, you get the same effect, right? To calculate in some way the price elasticity of this compensation. So there was a lot of discussion here because the company felt that giving $1 or $2 is not a good practice because it can appear as insulting to the customers. If you give $1, no one's going to care. Like Jean-François said, like if I see some money on my balance, I'm going to go ahead and take a ride. But if I have $1 or $2, like I'm going to feel like it's kind of, you know, pocket change, like it doesn't matter. So there was kind of a discussion of what to do. So what we decided to do is to add a discount. The next ride is 50% off. Now, the average price of a ride in Washington was $360. So the discount on average is $180. And the credit is still $5, which is more than one ride. So the findings, first findings, riders in credit and discount condition are more likely to be engaged. So both credit is more than control and discount is more than control. And it was a very good reassurance for us because it's a different experiment. It's a different market. New York City is much, much larger market than Washington. A different maturity. The platform was operating 5 years already in New York City, but only 1 year in DC. And it was in the winter and not in the summer. So there's a lot of different external factors, but still we retrieve the same finding. And what we observed also, that credit and discounts didn't have a significant difference, meaning it's enough to give 50%, 180, and you get the same effect as giving $5. Meaning that $5 is kind of an overkill, and the price sensitivity to just bring people back, it's enough to give the 50% discount. Now, of course, there is a future research that is open, is to find the optimal price discounts for different customer segments. And we did a couple of follow-up experiments on that by using machine learning models and segmentation of customers and trying different types of discounts for different segments and finding the best segment. Now the third experiment, very quickly. So after experiment 1 and 2, the company came and told me, look, at the end of the day, you give money to people and they ride more. We know that. We know that if we give money to people, they will use service more. How do you know that giving the money to people who experience a frustration is better than giving the money to random people? So I was very excited. I said, okay, perfect. Let's do an experiment and let's give money to random people, give money to frustrated people and see, compare the two. And they told me, of course, for legal reason, we cannot give money to random people. So we came up with an interesting design called the Viaversary. Viaversary, let's say if Jean-François joined the company as a customer on February 7, The year after is the anniversary of the customer joining the company. And in that case, you're going to receive a message, hey, happy Viaversary. It's been a year that you joined the company. Here is $5 of credit for the next month. So we did this experiment, and we found that the difference was not statistically significant. Here there was a little caveat because we have a smaller sample size. And potentially it's possible that we did a lot of sample size calculation in the paper to show that it's not 100% clear that it was enough. But even if it's enough, the average effect was 10% and in the other one was 12%. So we get 20% extra in the other one. And the implication is if you have limited budget, and this company, for example, in New York City, had a budget of $15,000 per week for promotions. This comparison of the two experiments suggests that you are better off allocating promotions to frustrated riders versus non-frustrated riders. And we did also a lot of different analyses to show this implication by using propensity score matching, by using matching methods, and some other like econometric techniques. Let me just wrap up. So today we investigated whether a service provider should proactively compensate users who experience a frustration. And again, the keyword is proactive. Now, what is interesting, after we wrote this paper, Uber started doing the same policy and actually also wrote a paper on a similar topic. Airlines now are doing that routinely. Many times, if you are like a VIP customer in an airline company and you experience a delay, they will proactively reach out to give you something. Hotels are doing it. A lot of people, I presented this talk in many universities and many people send me emails. Oh, I also got this in another company. So now it's kind of a very common practice. At least that's my impression. We answered this question by running 3 field experiments, use several empirical methods, and we have 4 findings. Sending compensation to frustrated riders is profitable, positive ROI, almost 100%, and boosts the engagement. It works well for waiting, but not for traveling. It seems more effective than sending the same offer to non-frustrated riders, and it has an impact moderated by past usage. It works best for intermediate users. And we also found that sending credit works better than all the other incentives that we tried. And just to finish the talk, I like to show you a sample of text messages. So we did this experiment across 3 times. We got more than 6,000 people, and many of them send a message to reply to the credits, and they're very happy about it. So my claim is, on top of this, you make customer excited. They feel they're taken care of. They feel like, oh, the company did some AI in real time to acknowledge the fact there was an issue, they're trying to solve it, they give me some money, and they keep recommending Via. So you have also network effects because the fact that you proactively take care of your customers. So that's it for my talk.